Hey guys, it's Alexandra from yarncraftsandcoffee.com. Today I'm going to show you how to make a flat circle using double crochet stitches. And yes, I am aware that these are not flat because they are curling around the edges, but this is by the nature of the yarn that I've used for these, not an indicator that the pattern doesn't work flat. All three of these are going to be beanies that I have been experimenting with different weight yarns. The one on the left is Lion Brand Kobo, Barocco Vintage down at the bottom, and then I have Lion Brand Woolies at the top right. And while I'm going to be turning these into beanies, this is going to be the technique that you're going to use no matter what you're working that is a flat circle where you want to work with double crochet stitches. This could be the bottom of a basket, it could be a top-down beanie like I'm making, it could be the bottom of a bag, it could be a coaster or a facial scrubby or a trivet. Anything that you're going to be making where you need to start with a flat circle where you're increasing up to a certain diameter size to get a certain measurement. Depending on the yarn that you choose for your project, that is going to be how it lays. So if you're making coasters and you're using a 100% cotton, you're not going to have this curl around the edge. Your coaster is going to be a lot heavier and it's going to lay flatter. These are wool blends, and the wool blends by nature have this curl even though they do lay flat. So if I was using this for a project where I needed it to be completely flat, after I get it finished, then I would block it so that it would lay flat. But since these are going to be turned into hats, they're going to get additional rounds. The weight of it is going to weigh it down, and this curl is not going to be an issue. So that's going to depend on what you're making and what yarn you're using. In my samples today, I'm using a worsted weight yarn. That's a number 4 weight yarn, even though the Kobo is technically a lightweight number 3. It's thicker like a lighter worsted weight yarn, and I'm using an H8 5mm crochet hook. Depending on the project that you're making, gauge may be essential. So gauge is essential when the finished size of the project matters. For example, a beanie has to be a certain size to fit your head. So you need to check your gauge against the pattern or against the measurements that you know it should be to ensure that it's going to fit correctly. A coaster has a lot of wiggle room, so you do not necessarily have to check gauge unless that's important to you, if you're okay that it might come out a little bit smaller or a little bit larger. We're going to be working 7 rounds of increasing for our circles. That's what I need for my beanies. So I'm going to show increasing up to round 7. You can use the timestamp section down below to jump ahead in the video if you want at any point, or to jump back in the video as well. After I complete each round, I am going to stop and check the diameter measurement, and I'm going to encourage you to do the same. Again, it really depends what you're making. Another thing that I encourage you to do, these are 3 different yarns. These 2 on the right are considered the same exact weight, a worsted weight, and I used the same H8 5mm crochet hook for both of them. The measurements after each round came out differently for both of these. The Kobo yarn also had a different measurement. So 3 relatively similar yarns with 3 different measurements after working round 2, for example. If you have a project notebook, I encourage you to take notes as you go and take them starting in round 2 for each round after that. Make a note how many stitches you start with. Each one of these started with 10 stitches in the center. So I have 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. Make a note of how many stitches you start with in the center and then what your diameter size is after round 2, round 3, and so on. And the diameter size is going to be the measurement from the left edge directly across the center all the way to the right edge. So for a coaster, if you wanted it to be 4 inches, that's how you would measure it. For a beanie, that is the measurement that you use to calculate the head circumference that hat will fit. Or if you wanted to do a cup cozy of some sort, you would need to measure your diameter and then do the math to make sure that the circumference is going to fit. I do keep notes for all of mine. This one I used Barocco Vintage, and I started with 10 double crochets. Then round 2 had 20 double crochets, and 2 1/4 was my diameter. Round 3 had 30 stitches, and 3 1/4 was my diameter, and I do that all the way up to round 7. And I usually stop after round 7 because I'm usually making beanies, and that's as much as I might need. If you're working with a lighter weight yarn, then you might want to go even longer until you get to at least 7 inches. There isn't a ton of stuff that I make that I need more than a 7-inch diameter for, but it does happen. So I have notes for all the yarns that I use, and this particular note here is when I used an H85mm crochet hook. I do keep separate notes if I use different hook sizes as well. Typically, I do 8 double crochets, 10 double crochets, 12 double crochets, and then sometimes I will do 14 double crochets. I don't use 14 very often, so I don't do it as often, but if you do a 10 and a 12, you can average those numbers to see what the diameter is going to be if you did 11 stitches in the beginning ring. So I do like to have that range there. Another way you can kind of guesstimate what it's going to be, if you did 10 double crochets, round 2 was 2 1/4. If you want to do 11 double crochets in the ring instead, then the diameter goes up about 1/8 of an inch. So from 2 1/4, it would go up to about 2 3/8 inches. And again, this can vary, especially if you're using a lighter weight yarn or a chunkier weight yarn, but with worsted weight yarn, it's relatively about this amount, even if you went up to a 5.5 I9 hook. Another reason I like to write it down is sometimes I can see a pattern that's forming. This one, my numbers are kind of all over the place, but with the H85mm hook, a lot of the times the rounds will increase by about 7/8 of an inch. So if round 3 was 3 1/4, it's safe to say round 4 would be 4 1/8, and then round 5 would be 5. You can see from my notes here, that wasn't the case when I used Barocco Vintage. If you're using an I9 5.5mm crochet hook, the rounds usually go up in 1-inch increments. So if I make notes as I go and a pattern emerges, I can use that to look ahead to see if I'm on the right track before I work 6 or 7 rounds, just in case I need to restart with a smaller or larger number of stitches in the beginning ring. So if you do quite a bit of projects that start with a circle, whether that's coasters or beanies or any other circular project, I do encourage you to make yourself a cheat sheet that you can use to reference later. Another thing I want to show you, even if you start with double crochets, you do not have to end with double crochets. The shaping and the amount of stretch is a lot easier to establish in a double crochet pattern versus single crochet and half double crochet. This is especially true for projects like beanies and cup cozies. This is going to stretch 2 inches. It's really easy to get the shaping and the sizing correct. Single crochet and half double crochet is a little bit more complicated. So if you started with double crochets, did all of your increasing rounds, you could very easily switch the stitch pattern after that to something else. This is the Suzette stitch that I've done for the body of this beanie, and I did all of the hats I'm about to show you double crochets for the crown. And then the only thing you have to do is in the last round, make sure that your stitch multiple is set up for whatever stitch pattern you want to move into. For example, the Suzette stitch is a stitch multiple of 2, so I would just want to make sure that I increased or decreased as necessary to get myself set up for that. But here is one idea. Here's another one, worked with the granny stitch pattern. Another one where I did shells that are also double crochet stitches. This one is worked in mosaic crochet. And then I have just a simple double crochet version, but it's striped. So all of these start with just double crochets as the crown. And I've done all these on beanies, but you could use this for anything. You could do this for a basket or for a market bag or for a cup cozy. where you start with the double crochet base and then you move into whatever stitch pattern you want for the body. And the good thing about this is that you usually don't even see the base. If you were doing this as a cup cozy, this would be covered by the base of your cup, and then the only thing you would see is your Suzette stitch. As a beanie, this part at the top is going to sit at the top back of your head where you kind of have that little circle going on that your hair comes from. And then the crown expands outward, but by the time you get to the part that's actually going to be like around your ear and your forehead, then you're already into whatever stitch pattern you want for the body. So even though they don't necessarily go together, you don't really notice that top section too much. Now, this doesn't work the same way if you're doing like a trivet or a coaster because you'd have to continue to increase, but this switch in pattern works well for projects like beanies and cup cozies and baskets, things like that. So in today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to start at the very beginning, how to increase for each round up through round 7, and how to check the diameter of your project. I'm also going to be showing you the technique that I like to use to keep my seams straight as I work in the round in double crochets. If you do your increases in the more traditional way, then instead of your seam being straight, it's going to start moving diagonally, and this drives me crazy. So I use a very special technique here when I'm increasing, and I continue that through the body as well. So I'm going to be showing you how to do this technique. There are other ways that you could do this too. So for this flat circle, we're not turning our work, which means that the side that you're looking at right here is the front side of the fabric, or the right side. And if you flip it over, you can see that the stitches are less defined. They're not quite as pretty. This is the wrong side, or the back side of the fabric. So if you're looking for an alternate method that will help keep your seam straight, one way is going to be to work round 1 and then chain and turn. Work round 2 from the other side, chain and turn, work round 3 from the front side, and continue working in this manner. What it's going to do is it's going to make both sides look the same, so that either side could be the right side or the wrong side, and it's also going to keep your seam straight. That's going to be one option. Another option is going to be that instead of doing a slip stitch join, you fasten off your yarn and do an invisible join. And if you're working a small project like a coaster or a trivet, you might want to do that, especially if you're working stripes. But that's not my go-to, especially for larger projects, because that means sewing in your ends after each round. But it does completely take away that seam, and it's super consistent throughout the whole entire round. Another option you can try instead of doing a beginning chain is you can do a standing double crochet, which mimics the look of a regular double crochet. If you're working shorter stitches, you might be interested in working continuously, which means you don't join at the end of your round. You just keep going. However, with the double crochet being such a tall stitch, this is not something that I would really recommend, because number 1, you're going to have to modify it here at the end of round 1 to avoid any gap in here and make it a smooth transition. But number 2, you're also going to get a pretty heavy spiral pattern in your project. So the continuous method is really great for other stitch patterns that are shorter, not really something that I would go with for double crochet, but I did want to mention it. So again, I'm going to be showing you how to do my technique here for keeping your seam straight. If you have another method that you prefer following, feel free to do that instead. Before we get into the tutorial, I want to talk about the diameter and the circumference of your project. This is a little cheat sheet for beanies, but if you have something that is a specific size, for example, your head size is 22 inches, or your cup is about 14 inches in circumference, there is a formula that you use to determine how big the diameter needs to be of your circle. If you're working a flat project like a coaster, it's really easy to just measure the diameter and stop when you get close to the size that you want, like 4 inches. But if you are working something to fit around something, then you have the circumference, which is the measurement all the way around versus the diameter, which is just measured across the center. And the formula is you take the circumference, in this case I have it for a beanie so it's a head circumference, you subtract 2 because 2 is going to be the amount of stretch of the yarn. And that's going to be true pretty much for anything except 100% cotton and 100% polyester. Any other kind of blend or 100% wool or 100% acrylic is going to have this 2 inches of stretch. So you take your circumference minus 2 inches and then you divide that by pi, which is 3.14. That's going to give you the diameter that you want to make for your flat circle. So in this example, I have a head circumference of 22 inches. That's measured all the way around your head above your eyebrows. Minus the 2 inches for stretch equals 20 inches in circumference. Divided by pi, 3.14, equals a diameter of 6.369 inches, or 6 3/8 inches. And depending on your project, there may be a little bit of wiggle room in your diameter size as well. But this is the formula that you're going to use to determine the diameter size that you need to make. And here, I'll just share with you really quick that there are average head sizes based on the age of the person, newborn 3 to 6 months, adult small, adult large. Those are average head sizes. And the diameters that I have next to it, I've just taken those numbers minus the 2 inches divided by pi, and I have my range here. And if you'd like to do a lot of hats, you might want to make yourself a cheat sheet just so that you don't have to do these calculations every time. But this is how you're going to determine your sizing for projects worked in the round where you're shooting for a specific circumference. If you have any questions about this, please drop me a comment below and let me know, and I will do my best to answer your questions. But let's go ahead and get started with our flat circle. We're going to start with a slip knot, so I've pulled the yarn strand over my fingers here, wrap it around my index finger 2 times, and hold tension with my thumb and my middle finger. I'm going to go to the strand that's on the left, pull it up over the other one but not off my finger. Then I'll go to the one that's on the left now, pull it up over the other one and off my finger. Grab my crochet hook, insert it into the loop on my finger and pull it off. Hold the working yarn in my right hand, short tail end in my left. I'm just going to pull that so that this loop will go to normal tension. And now we can get in position to start our chain. Now I do prefer starting with a chain, joining that chain, and then working round 1 into it. If you prefer working with a magic circle, you can do that too. I am going to hold the slip knot here in between my fingers so that this loop does not get too tight as I work. We're going to swoop the yarn downward and behind, hook the strand, and pull it through the loop on our hook. Swoop the hook downward and behind, hook the strand, and then pull it through the loop on our hook. Downward and behind, hook the strand, pull it through the loop on our hook. Each time we do that, we get one of these V shapes here. When we're counting our chains, we don't count the one that's on our hook. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 chains. If you're starting with 8 or 9 stitches in the first round, then I recommend you start with a beginning chain here of 3, and then you begin working the rounds into the first chain down at the bottom. If you're going to start with 10 or 11 stitches, then you'll work up to a chain 4, join that chain, and then work into the center ring. And if you're going to have 12 or more stitches, then you're going to start with a chain of 5, join that chain, and then work into the center ring. When you're working something that has 8 or 9 stitches and you're starting with the beginning chain of 3, you want to leave an extra long tail, because as you work into this first chain, it's going to open that up, making space for all of your stitches. So you want to make sure you have extra length here that it can take from. So we don't count the loop on our hook. We have 1, 2, 3 chains, that one where our slip knot is. I'm going to hold the tension of the loop on my hook with my finger, rotate this chain horizontally so it's easier to work into, and we're going to be working our double crochets right into that first chain. So to double crochet, we're going to yarn over. Insert our hook into the center of that stitch. Yarn over and pull through. We have 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops, leaving 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. That's going to complete your first double crochet here. The beginning chain is not going to count as a stitch. And we're going to continue working our double crochets into that first chain down there at the bottom. Yarn over, insert your hook back into that same chain. Yarn over and pull through 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops only, leaving 2 loops there. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain. Yarn over and pull through 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And as you can see, this chain is already starting to open up. And it will continue to do so as I add my stitches in here. So if at any point it gets too large and you're worried about your yarn pulling through, or you just want to pull it down so it's a little bit easier to work into, you just hold on to the slip knot in between your fingers and pull on that tail end and it will close it back up. But you don't want to close that up all the way until you've added all of your stitches, because if it's too tight, it's going to be really hard to work into. Now I'm going to continue working my double crochets there into that first chain until I have all my stitches ready to go. We count this using the V shapes along the top there. So rotate your fabric just a little bit so you can see those. 1, 2, 3 double crochets. The smaller V shapes along the side are the beginning chain, and we don't count those as a stitch. And you can also count your posts here. There's 1, 2, 3. That's each one of those double crochets. You can see there that my first chain opened up quite a bit, but I have all my stitches here. I'm going to hold on to the slip knot in between my fingers and pull on that beginning tail end so this will close up. And now I'm going to slip stitch join to the very first stitch here of the round. And when you're ready to do your slip stitch, it can be difficult to determine where that first stitch is. So the easiest way is going to be to count backwards from where you just finished until you get to the total number that you're supposed to have. In this blue sample here, I have 9 double crochets. So using those V shapes along the top, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I'll insert my hook underneath both loops at the top of that stitch, picking up the V shape there. Yarn over, pull through that stitch and through the loop that's on my hook. That slip stitch joins the round, and now round 1 is officially complete. Now I'm going to slip stitch join to this first chain down here at the bottom. I'm going to hold the tension of the loop on my hook with my index finger from my right hand. Rotate my chain so it's horizontally. Insert my hook into the center of the first chain. Yarn over, which is basically what we did when we did our chain. We just swoop up behind and hook the strand. Pull it through that stitch and the loop that's on your hook. Now what this does is it closes this ring. If we pull this open, there's a hole in the center. There's also a hole at the top. That's from where we inserted into the first chain because the slip knot is not secured. We don't want to work into that hole at the top, but there is a hole underneath it in the center. That's where we're going to be working. Alright, we're going to start with a chain 2. This chain 2 is not going to count as a stitch. We're going to be working double crochets, and we're going to work them into that center ring that I mentioned, not that top hole, but the center ring. You can pull on your tail end from where you started, and it will tighten up that last stitch. Don't pull too tight because you want the flexibility of being able to work into that ring. As we work, we're going to hold this beginning tail end to the back of our chains so that we can crochet over it to secure it in place. That's going to help us when we're ready to close up this ring. So if you want to close up this hole at the top, you can close it a little bit. And then hold that strand right underneath your chains. We're going to double crochet into that center ring. To double crochet, we yarn over, insert our hook into the ring, so pull it open and go right into that center ring. When you do that, you're going to have the chains on your hook and then that strand as well, since we're holding it to the back. Yarn over, pull it through. You have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops only, leaving 2 loops there. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. That completes your first double crochet. Yarn over, insert your hook back into the center ring. It's going to be much easier to see now that that first stitch has been worked. Right into that hole in the center. You have your chain on your hook and your tail end held to the back. Yarn over and pull through 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops only. You have 2 loops left. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, insert your hook into the center ring. You have the chains and the tail end. Yarn over and pull through 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops only. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And just like that, we have 3 double crochets worked. That's 1, 2, 3, and we don't count that beginning chain here. The easiest way to count this is to rotate this and look at those V shapes along the edge. Each time you create a stitch, it's going to have one of these V shapes here. So we have 1, 2, 3 double crochets. You're going to see those V shapes at the end as well. They're going to be much tighter. That's from that beginning chain 2 that we worked. Just look for the bigger V shapes there. Those are going to be your double crochets. 1, 2, 3. Now, depending on the size that you're working, that's going to determine how many double crochets you're going to put into that center ring. So I'm going to put up a chart that's going to show how many double crochets you're going to want to have. Alright, for my sample I have 10 double crochets. We're going to slip stitch join to the first double crochet of the round. So the easiest way to determine which stitch that's going to be is to count backwards from where you just finished, using those V shapes along the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So however many double crochets you needed for your size, go ahead and count backwards. Once you get to that last stitch, that's where you're going to slip stitch join. To do that, we're going to insert our hook underneath both loops of that V shape at the top. Yarn over, pull through that stitch and through the loop that's on our hook. That's a slip stitch join. It completes your round, and we're going to do that at the end of each round that we make. I'm going to pull up on this loop so I don't lose it. If you look to the back, you've carried this strand underneath all the way around. So you can hold on to the center of your ring, pull on that strand, and it will close that hole up. And we'll secure this closed once we're ready to weave in our ends. For now, we'll just forget about it. Alright, round 1 is officially complete and we're ready to move on. Each round is going to start with a chain 2. While we're working our increases, this chain 2 is not going to count as a stitch. For each round, we need to increase our stitch count so that this circle will get larger but also lay flat. In round 2, I'm going to have 2 times the number of stitches that I had in round 1. So for my sample, I have 10 double crochets. 10 times 2 equals 20. That's how many stitches I'll have in round 2. Round 3 is going to have 3 times the number of stitches in round 1. So 10 times 3, round 3 will have 30. Round 4 will have 4 times, so it will have 40, and that's how it's going to continue the whole time that you're increasing. It doesn't matter how many stitches you start with, it's going to be 2 times that number, 3 times that number, and so on. Traditionally, as you increase, you work 2 stitches into that very first stitch, and then you follow your pattern around. I'm going to be showing a different way that I use to help keep my seam straight. if you were to put 2 stitches into this first stitch and you continue in that manner all the way around for however many rounds you need, your seam is going to start veering off diagonally. And this really drives me crazy. So to make my seam straight, which is going to help it be a little bit less noticeable, but even so, at least it's straight, instead of working 2 stitches right off the bat, I'm going to work 1 stitch as the first half of my increase, work around in pattern, and once I finish the last set of repeats, I'm going to work 1 more stitch into the very next stitch, and that's going to be the same as the first, to complete my second half of that first set of increases. So we're going to have 1 stitch here to the left of the beginning chain, and 1 stitch here to the right of the beginning chain. So this is my preferred method. I'm going to be showing this method in this tutorial. If you prefer working the other way, you can do that too. As long as we both end up with the correct number of stitches at the end, it doesn't matter which method you choose. For round 2, we're going to work 2 stitches into each stitch all the way around. So I'm going to start by working a double crochet into this very first stitch that the chain is connected to. Yarn over, insert my hook right into the top of that stitch, into that next hole that you see there. You have both loops from the V shape of that first stitch on your hook. Yarn over and pull through, 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Now, as I mentioned, I'm working just 1 stitch into this first one. I'm going to work all the way around and add my last stitch at the end. So now I'm going to go to the next double crochet, and I'm going to work 2 double crochets into that stitch. So the first one as normal here at the top, and then the second one is going to go right into the same exact stitch. And now we've just worked 2 stitches into that 1 stitch, and we've increased the total number by 1. Now we're going to go into the next stitch and work 1 double crochet as normal. Then work the second double crochet back into that same exact stitch. And now we have another set of 2 worked into just 1 stitch. As I go along, I like to keep track of the stitches that I'm working, and this first round is really easy because you know you're counting by 2s. So each time you work into the next stitch, you're going to have 2, and then 2, and then 2. So go ahead and continue working 2 stitches into each stitch all the way around until you get to the end. You can use those V shapes there along the top to count the stitches that you've worked. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochets so far. Beginning chain does not count as a stitch. And following my method, once I get here to the end, I'm going to have 2 double crochets into this last stitch here, and I'll have 1 stitch left to work. Alright, I've just completed my last set of 2 stitches here. My sample started with 10, so I know in round 2 I'm going to have 20. And if I counted the V shapes here, I currently have 19 double crochets. I need to work my last stitch to complete this first set of 2, and I'm going to do that into the very next stitch. It's a smaller stitch there. It's connected to your beginning chain 2. It's just to the right. I'm going to work my double crochet right in there. And now I have the 20 stitches that I need to complete my round. I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch join. And remember that this stitch that we just finished plus that first stitch completes our first set of increases with 2 stitches. Go to the very first stitch here, insert right underneath the top, picking up both loops as normal. Yarn over, pull through that stitch and through the loop that's on my hook. And round 2 is officially complete. And we have 2 times the number of stitches that we had in round 1. All of us crochet a little bit differently, so it doesn't matter if you use the same hook as me and the same yarn as me. It's possible that your circle might come out smaller or larger than mine. So it's really important that we check gauge as we go along, and I like to start doing it in round 2. And then I just have a piece of paper next to me and I write down what my diameter size is for each round starting in round 2. This way I can see the pattern that's emerging, and before I even get to the size that I need, I can see if I'm on the right track. And I just like to find out sooner rather than later. So I'm going to grab my soft tape measure. I always start at the number 1 when I'm measuring. I'm going to put it up on the edge of the left side here, and I'm going to measure directly across the center to the edge of the right side. And my diameter is measuring 2 1/4, because remember I took away that first inch, so this is not 3 1/4, it's 2 1/4. I just get a more accurate reading if I start at the 1 than if I start down at the bottom. So on my piece of paper here, I'm going to write, once I finish round 3, I'll measure again and I'll see what that says. And then I'll write that down. And I'll keep doing that for each round that I work. Let's go ahead and continue into round 3. We're going to start with our chain 2. We're going to work 1 double crochet into this very first stitch here. That's the same stitch that the chain is connected to. That's going to count as the first stitch from our first set of increases, but we'll work the second half of that at the end. Now we're going to work just 1 double crochet into the next stitch. Now our repeat begins here. In the next stitch, we're going to work 2 double crochets. There's the first one as normal. Second one goes back into that same exact stitch. That gives us 2 stitches there. Now we work 1 stitch into the next. And now we have a set of 3. And for this round, you're going to be working in sets of 3, 2 double crochets in the next stitch, 1 double crochet in the next. That makes 3. 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into the next. That'll be another set of 3. So as I'm working this round, I like to go ahead and count in my head as I go. And I do count the first set as if it was complete, just so that it works the numbers out evenly, you know, 3, 6, 9, 12. I know that when I hit those numbers as I'm working around that I've completed my repeat. So starting with 2 and then 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I have 7. 8 goes in the same stitch, and 9, which is 1 double crochet in the next stitch, 9 completes my next set. So as long as my last double crochet is on that 3rd number, I know that I've done my increases correct all the way around. Another way that you can keep track as you go, you can say 1, 2, and then 1. One, 2, and then 1. And another way that you can keep track is you can just count 3. So you would count 1, 2, 3. You know that set is complete, and then 1, 2, 3. And you know that next set is complete as well. So a lot of ways that you can check yourself as you work around. Alright, whatever works for you, go ahead and continue this repeat all the way around of 2 stitches into the next, 1 stitch into the next one, until you get back to the beginning. Once you work your last set, you'll have 1 double crochet here. You're going to have 1 stitch less than the total number that you need for this round. We'll work the final stitch together to complete our first set and join our round. In this round, we're going to have 3 times the number of stitches that we started in round 1. Here's my last repeat here of 3 stitches, and now I have 1 stitch left to work to complete my first set of increases. And I'm going to put that in the very next stitch here. That is right underneath my beginning chain. 1 double crochet in there. This double crochet plus the first one complete my first set of increases with 2 stitches. And now I can slip stitch join to the very first stitch. So I'm going to insert right underneath both loops of the first stitch, yarn over, pull through that stitch and through the loop that's on my hook to complete a slip stitch. And now round 3 is complete. And I have 3 times the number of stitches in this round as I did in round 1. Now I'm going to set this down, and I'm going to grab my soft tape measure. And I'm going to measure from the edge of the left side all the way across the center to the edge of the right side just to check myself here. And I'm at 3 1/4. Remember, I started the 1, so it's not 4 1/4, it is 3 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. And now I'm ready for round 4. And remember that I'm just working a sample here with 10 stitches. Yours may be a different amount of stitches here, which on its own could result in a bigger or smaller circle. Your tension could also be different than mine, which could result in a bigger or smaller circle. So let's go ahead and start with round 4. Round 4, I'm going to chain 2. I'm going to work 1 double crochet into this very first stitch that my chain is connected to. And then I'm going to work a double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. And then I will complete this first increase once I work the last stitch at the end, but it will have 4 stitches. So our repeat for this round is going to be 2 double crochets in the next stitch. And then 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. That's our first repeat there. And now we're going to continue in sets of 4 like this. 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Then 1 double crochet into each of those next 2 stitches. And the way that I like to count this is I will count by 4s, counting that first set as if that increase was complete. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I know that whenever I get to that 4th number, that my stitches are spot on. Another way that you can do it as you go is you can do it just counting in sets of 4. First stitch of the repeat here is 1, second stitch 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to continue working 2 stitches into the next stitch, 1 stitch into each of the next 2 all the way around. Once I have the last stitch from the last repeat here, I will have just 1 more stitch left to work in that first stitch, and then I'll have 4 times the amount of stitches I started with in round 1. Here's my last repeat right there of 4 stitches. Now I have just 1 stitch left to work into this very next stitch, the one that my chain is connected to. And this stitch is going to complete the first set of increases there. Now I'm going to go to the very first stitch, slip stitch join, and round 4 is now complete with 4 times the amount of stitches that I started with in round 1. As I'm sure you can imagine, now that we've completed another round, we're going to go ahead and check our gauge again, laying our soft tape measure up against the edge of the left side directly across the center and see what it measures on the edge of the right side. And here you can see that mine now measures 4 1/8 inches. I'm going to go ahead and write this down. For round 5, we're going to start with a chain 2, work 1 double crochet into this very first stitch. We'll work the second half of that increase later on. Then we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. Our repeat for this round begins here, 2 stitches into the next stitch, then 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So round 5 is in sets of 5 stitches. And now we'll continue with this same repeat all the way around. 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. All the way around. After you finish the last double crochet over here, we'll have 1 more left to work. Round 5 is going to finish out with 5 times the amount of stitches that you started with in round 1. There's the last stitch from my last repeat. Now I have 1 stitch left to work into the next stitch, which is the same one as my chain is connected to. That completes my first set of increases there with 2 stitches, and now I'm going to slip stitch join to the first stitch. Round 5 is now complete with 5 times the amount of stitches as I had in round 1. Soft tape measure right across the center from the edge of the left side to the edge of the right side, and you can see here that mine is measuring 5 1/8 inches. For round 6, we're going to start with a chain 2. We're going to work 1 double crochet into that first stitch that our chain is connected to, and then we'll work 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. This is where our repeat begins. 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So the repeat for round 6 is in sets of 6 stitches. Alright, now you're going to go ahead and continue in this manner all the way around, working 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. Once you make it to the end, we'll work 1 more stitch there to complete that first set of increases, and round 6 is going to finish with 6 times the amount of stitches that you started with in round 1. There's my last stitch from my last set of the repeat here, 6 stitches. Now I'm going to work my last double crochet into this next stitch, which is the same stitch connected to my beginning chain. This stitch plus the very first one complete my first set of increases, and now slip stitch join to the first stitch. And round 6 is now complete, and we have 6 times the amount of stitches that we started with in round 1. We're going to go ahead and grab our soft tape measure. Measure from the edge of the left side all the way across the center to the edge of the right side. For round 7, we're going to start with a chain 2, work 1 double crochet into this very first stitch that our chain is connected to, and then work 1 double crochet into each of those next 5 stitches. Now the repeat for this round begins here, 2 double crochets into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. So the repeat for round 7 is worked in sets of 7 stitches. Alright, you'll continue in this manner all the way around, working 2 stitches into the next stitch, 1 stitch into each of the next 5 stitches. Once you complete your last stitch here from the last set of increases, we'll work 1 more stitch into that first one, and this round will finish out with 7 times the amount of stitches that you started with in round 1. There's the last stitch here from my last set of 7 stitches. Now I'm going to work my last stitch into this very next stitch, which is the same one connected to my beginning chain 2. That's going to complete my first set of increases there. And now slip stitch join to the first stitch. Round 7 is complete with 7 times the amount of stitches that we started with in round 1. I'm going to grab my soft tape measure, measure the diameter from the edge of the left side all the way across the center to the edge of the right side, and this one is measuring 6 7/8. Now we've completed 7 rounds of increasing. Depending on the yarn weight that you're using and the project that you're making, you may need to continue increasing to get to the size that you're looking for. You're going to continue increasing in a similar manner if you're working a flat project like a scrubby, coaster, trivet, washcloth, anything that is just going to be a flat circle. You can finish off now, or you can add another round as a border. I often like to do single crochet just to give a polished look. Either regular single crochet or single crochet in the back loop only. Sometimes I do reverse single crochet. If you do want to add an edging, you'll want to make sure that you also increase in the same manner while you're using that other stitch. That way the circle will continue to grow but lay flat. If you're going to be continuing this project in the round to do something like a beanie or a bag, then you can either continue working in double crochets, or you can switch up the body now to any other stitch pattern that you like, as I showed earlier with some of those other examples. So let's talk about these 2 options really quick. If you're going to continue in double crochet, the way to keep the seam straight throughout the body, since the chain 2 is now going to start to count as a stitch, I would recommend alternating where you place your first stitch and your last stitch of the round. The first stitch is this one right next to the chain that the chain is connected to. The second stitch is to the left of that. For the next round, I would start with my very first double crochet in the second stitch, work all the way around, and work the very last stitch in the same stitch as the chain, just to the right of it. Then join to your first double crochet, chain 2 again. This time work your first double crochet in the first stitch that the chain is connected to. Here it will come out just to the left. Then you work all the way around, finishing with your last stitch over here on the right, and then slip stitch join to the first double crochet, and continue alternating like that until your project is as tall as it needs to be. Working the first double crochet into the second stitch, and then the next round you work it into the first stitch. That's going to help the beginning chain 2 stay straight here in the center as it's pulled one way and then the other way back and forth. And here in the body of your project, this chain 2 is going to count as one of your double crochets. If you want to change up the stitch pattern, I'm going to use this granny stitch as an example. What I would recommend doing first, if you do not have the correct number of stitches here for the stitch multiple that you need for whatever stitch you want to switch to, I recommend working one more round in double crochet. No increasing though, you're just going to work one round all the way around, and here is where you will modify it if you need to increase or decrease. The granny stitch pattern, for example, is a multiple of 3. In my sample here, I started with 10. 10 times 7 rounds is 70 stitches. 70 is not a multiple of 3, but 69 is. So in that case, just taking one away, I would work double crochets in each stitch all the way around and not count my beginning chain as a stitch. That way I end up with 69 stitches. Let's say I had 77 stitches right now, which is not a multiple of 3 either. 78 is, so that means I would need to increase my stitch count in the next round. So in this next round where you would work one double crochet all the way around, you just need to make sure that you increase by 1 stitch. And you can do that here in the beginning where you just work 1 stitch in that first stitch all the way around, 1 stitch in the same stitch at the end, like we did with the increases before. That would increase it to 78. Or you could add that extra stitch in any stitch as you work around. So I would recommend after you complete all your increase rounds, work one more round in double crochet all the way around, adding or subtracting however many stitches you need to get to the stitch multiple you need for the stitch you want to switch to. Then after you join this next round of double crochet, you will be able to then move on and start the stitch pattern that you want. I'm going to link some of these projects in the description box below, so if you want to try any of these beanies or any other project that I have video tutorials for, you're going to find them in the description box below. If you have any requests or if you have any questions, please make sure to drop me a comment below to let me know. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time.